My name is Bob Bloom, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. My friends call me Bob or Roberto or Babito or Bobolino or Bloomer or Boomer or something with a B. So B Bloom, that's who I am. And I'm here to share a couple of stories with you. One was a near-death experience I had just prior to my 20th birthday. And I want to share that because although I don't consider it the pendulum, the point at which my entire life turned, it was incredibly impactful, and it changed me in ways that even now I probably don't realize just how many ways that it did change me. Leading up to that point, I'm from a traditional Midwestern family, but I've never been traditional. And a big part of that had to do with I was born with really bad speech impediments. I was dyslexic. I had a lot of challenges communicating and making myself heard, and that caused all kinds of problems. So, unlike people who can speak, well, I should back that up a little bit. Because I couldn't communicate very well, I became a target of bullying. And since I couldn't defend myself with my words, I defended myself with my fists, and that caused even more problems for me. So, probably not a surprise that at 18 years of age, I joined the Marine Corps and became a grunt in the Marine Corps. And I was in my first full year when that experience happened. At the time, we were stationed in Coronado doing rubber raft training, which is it's incredibly brutal training because you're in and out of cold water all day long, running up and down the beach, carrying around a 400-pound rubber raft with 8 other people. And then the night of the final exercise, I had some surprises in it. One of which was when we disembarked the ship, we paddled in about 1,000 meters to shore and discovered that there were 4 or 5 foot shore breakers, which swamped all the rafts. So we all got soaked in 50-something degree water. And then we laid on a beach for over an hour to wait for everybody to actually get deployed to the beach because everybody was collecting equipment. And it was about 47 degrees out. So about a half a dozen guys got carried off with hypothermia. I didn't get carried off, but by the time the exercise was over and I'd taken a hot shower, I felt just terrible. And my girlfriend only lived about 20 minutes away, so I drove over to her house. I walked in and she barely said a word to me. She just looked at me and knew I was going straight to bed because I was done. So if you've ever laid down in your bed where you're really, really tired and your bed just kind of catches you and hugs you, that's how it felt when I laid down. But then I found myself and I just fell right to the mattress. And the next thing I knew, I was zooming along at what felt like greater than light speed. There wasn't any buffeting or anything like that. There was just the sensation of moving really, really fast. And I thought to myself, what's happening? And a presence appeared to me and it said, you would call it dying. In just a moment, you're going to have to make a decision. If you go on into the light, you will not be returning to your body. They may think that was cause for concern, but the fact was, this was the first time I was ever free of pain in my life. Felt wonderful. There was no pain. There was no physical pain. There was no emotional pain, something I had never experienced in my life. And the next thing that happened was I got a taste of what my life meant to up until that point in time. And my sensation of it was, or the taste of it was that it just felt unfinished. And what felt like just seconds later, I heard a voice say, no, I have to go back. I have way too much left to accomplish. Now, I still had what appeared to be like a really see-through light body, but that voice didn't emanate from inside me. It seemed to emanate from somewhere outside of me, but I accepted it as my response because it told me the same thing that taste had. And so using only my mind, or I made the decision to return and using only my mind, slowing that momentum down. I was going towards a brilliant, kind of a pearlescent gold orb. And if you've ever seen what the sun looks like when it's roiling and it's just moving, but this was a little smoother and it was absolutely gorgeous and radiating this sense of, I can only call it well-being, complete and utter well-being. Started slowing my momentum going towards that. And the next thing I knew, it was like rubber bands, giant rubber bands, like pulled to their limit, and then just slammed me back into my body. And what I really remember was the feeling of my hands popping back in and my face popping back in, and especially my lips and my nose popping back in. And I hit my body so hard that it launched me forward up in bed. I literally sat bolt upright in bed. I'm looking around and now the room is dark, which was really weird. This didn't seem like it took a long time. But when I looked around, my girlfriend was asleep in the bed next to me. It was dark. And the moment I was back in my body, I was back in the pain. And juxtaposed against that utter sense of well being when I was going through that tunnel of light, I just started crying. I couldn't believe that I came back to suffer more, because that's what life had meant to me up until that point, was suffering. So from that, now the takeaways are priceless. These were things I wanted to give everybody if I possibly could, because the first awareness I had, and beyond a shadow of a doubt, was that I was a spiritual being having a human experience, not the other way around. And I would absolutely never fear death again. So just imagine what it's like to live when you know those two things for sure. And like, imagine who you'd be or what you might do if there was no fear of death whatsoever. So I had that going for me. But inside, I was a mess. Inside, I was in as much turmoil as you could be. And my belief was, the belief I was living with was that I was unlovable, but maybe I could accomplish my way into being loved. And so that's what my life was about at that time, trying to accomplish my way into being heard and to being understood and to being loved and to being nurtured. So a real backwards way of thinking, and obviously produced a whole lot of pain. Well, finally, in my mid 20s, I came home one day from work. I was married, 2 kids, and I came home to an empty house. And since this is really not a big part of the story, aside from the fact that it launched what would be for me 35-year journey or so, I came home to an empty house. My kids are gone. The apartment is empty. There was one chair left and a book on the floor. And I picked up the book on the floor, and it just so happened to be Dance in the Light by Shirley MacLaine. And it really provoked my curiosity. And then in my late 20s, I ran into a man who taught me a couple of really valuable skills. And I was determined to step outside my own pain. And that's a big component of moving out of pain and into joyous. You have to have a whole lot of courage, and you have to be committed to your own success, way more than you're committed to the old story. And I practiced these things. One was a meditation he taught me, which was a way to find myself in that quiet place within. If at some point later we can share this, I'd love to share that with you. And the other thing was inner child work. And I practiced religiously for the next 10 years. And 10 years later, my life was really different looking than it had been in my 20s. By then, I had accomplished my way into a heck of a life. I lived in a big old 3,300 square foot custom home with a resort style pool in the backyard and 3 fireplaces, 4 bedrooms. The home, I mean, it wasn't a McMansion. It was a step down from a McMansion because I never wanted to see myself in that kind of house, but it was everything I'd ever wanted in a house. I had new cars in the garage. I had a long-term love interest. Between myself and my girlfriend, we had 5 children, so there were always kids in and out of the house. And I had money and I had time to spend it. So from all outer appearances, I was living the life of Riley. I was living the life that everybody dreamed of. And one morning, this was the middle of 1996, I awoke and the house was empty, which was really unusual when you've got 5 kids. And so I slept in a little late. When I got up, I went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of coffee. We just moved into that house a year earlier and had just finished decorating. So I took that morning to go from room to room to really appreciate everything that we had accomplished. And the year before Christmas, we had lost everything in a house fire. So, this was 7 months later. I'm in this house, going from room to room, seeing my kids have their stuff back and living in a wonderful place. And I go from room to room, just appreciating everything I had. And When I walked in the family room, the living room, the dining room all had gigantic vaulted ceilings. So it was a very beautiful house. But in the middle of that, I stopped and I recognized I could let go of all of this right now because this isn't it. But I had no idea what it was a complete mystery to me. So I said a little prayer to God. I go, okay, what now? And the what now was about a month and a half later, I got fired from my high paying job. And I celebrated because I figured it was a response to exactly what I had asked for. And I spent the last 4 months of 1996 giving myself everything I always wanted. And my kids too, because that was part of everything I always wanted, was to give my kids everything they always wanted, and my girlfriend everything she always wanted. And it might not have been millionaire or billionaire, everything you always wanted, but it's all the things we wanted. We traveled to the coast, and I went to all the Arizona State football games and the Arizona Cardinal football games and played golf every day and had up myself a really good time. But besides all the fun, I also rededicated myself to all my wellness practices. I meditated every day. I began reading literature that uplifted me every day, or certain practices that I aligned myself with every day. And I began working out really hard every day. In fact, I broke 3 of those bicycles you ride in your bedroom that you pull back on and you ride in just a month and a half's time because I was a big guy, 250 pounds and real big, and I just yanked those silly things apart. But I got back into really good shape. And by the end of that 4 months, I felt so grateful for what I'd been given. I felt the need to give back. And for me, there was no doubt in my mind that I had been called for years. I mean, years and years and years. But fear had always kept me from committing. And I finally decided, and the exact words I said was, I was in a very quiet meditative state, and I said to God or spirit or Father or whatever you want to call that higher mind, I just said, I'm tired of being afraid. I'm not going to let fear ruin my life anymore. I don't care what you do to me. Blow me up if that's what you want to do. I have to know what's possible. And that's all that happened that night. But it was a complete, from my head to my toes, complete giving myself over to life and saying, do with me what you will. Now, the strange thing was, the very next day, when I sat down to meditate, I looked over at the clock. It was 8 o'clock at night, closed my eyes. I got into that quiet space. And the first thing I hear is, you and I are one. And because I'm in that quiet space, I'm in the observer position, which means I'm observing everything that's going on. I'm hearing everything that's going on, but I'm not reacting to anything that's going on. And when I hear you and I are one, all of a sudden, all these voices rise up and start, that can't be true. That's not possible. You're a liar. That's blasphemous. All the things I've been taught as a child. And for maybe a minute or two, those voices just kept screaming and screaming, and finally they subsided. And that voice said once more, you and I are one. All the voices started screaming again. After a couple of minutes, they calmed down. And for the third time, the voice said, you and I are one. Ask those voices to identify themselves and follow them to their source. And so a thought comes up and I say, who are you? And they say, I am you. Well, automatically I knew, well, no. I know you're not me because I'm the one asking the question. So who are you? And none of them could really answer that aside to say that they're me. And the more I questioned them, the more they just drifted off into nothingness. And all of a sudden I came to a point where it was completely, I'm not even sure how to explain this, completely quiet, completely in the void. And I was at one with everything. And so I asked that same voice, that same presence, well, if you and I are one, why don't I perceive life the same as you perceive life? And the voice said, you could have that right now. Just say the word and it will be so. And on that syllable, so, all of a sudden this incredible matrix just appeared around me. And it was brilliant, twinkling, iridescent lights and all connected and stretches far as the eye could see. And I realized in that moment that I was looking at all the possible stories that an embodied spirit could actually live. And as soon as I saw that, as soon as I recognized that, these words spilled out of my mouth. It wasn't something that I thought about. It just happened. It was like, oh, it's like we tell ourselves a giant story, buy into it hook, line, and sinker, and then we get to live out the stories we tell. And in that moment, I could kind of see like I was identified with these stories up here. And there were all kinds of different stories I could tell. And there was a whole bunch of just like, if you want to live La Vida de Loca, you just align with those stories over there. And all the stories were here and now. There was no past, there was no future. You moved from story to story by changing your story. And so when I saw that, I go, well, how do I change the story if I don't like the one I'm currently living? And in that moment, I was shown something that I didn't understand, but I fully do now. And it was kind of like a big valve, and if you've ever, or a piston. And if you've ever seen a piston in a valve, there's like little valves you turn on the outside so the piston can close and open, close and open. But if you shut those valves down and you try to close that piston, the pressure just keeps building and building and building, and you'll never be able to close the gap. That's kind of what it is between like where we are and where we want to be. Too much pressure. So the trick is just open the valves on the end and you can push that piston closed like that. And so I knew from seeing that, well, the path was letting go. I didn't need to add anything else to my life. All I needed to let go of. But then at that time, I didn't know what spirit was asking, but I do now. And it was really just let go of all the beliefs that don't identify, that don't resonate with where you want to be. And it's a feeling thing. Whatever your why is, keep focused on that and let everything else go, which was what I learned over about a 20-something year period, step by step by step by step by step. But the reason I'm sharing this story with you here now is because before that moment in my life, I fully believed that I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be alive. This was something I had to do. It felt like punishment. And suddenly, in this moment, when I'm given the choice to literally go back to source, I realize when I'm looking around, oh my God, I chose to be here. I want to be here. There are so many, the possibilities are endless, and I want it. So that was the big choice. So even though I still was going through a lot of hardship and was experiencing a lot of hardship, there was nothing ever again that was going to keep me from believing that I want to be here. This is my story, and I can influence the course of my life in very simple ways. But those are really the two stories right now. And the three takeaways are: you're a spiritual being having a human experience, not the other way around. Death is only a transition, it's not an ending. And lastly, your opportunities here on earth are unlimited. It's only what you can move to in your mind and body, and most importantly, embody and feel inside you. If you can feel something as being real inside you, you can move towards it and it will be your compass. God bless you all. Thank you.